I think we can start more or less. So some people are still entering, but since we will finish the session punctually at 45, so it's better, I think, to start. So welcome everyone to this last session. Some of you, I know, some of the participants, I know you have been in previous sessions of this event, but let me just remind to those that are just attending this session for the first time that this session is part of a larger event, which was our final multiplier event. When I say our, I refer to a group of researchers. We are a group of researchers that we share some projects, and our interest, our research interest focuses on researcher development, and particularly we are interested on early career researchers development. So this is our final multiplier event, and if you want to know more about the research and to see the outputs, the publications, and the resources we have produced through these projects, you can visit our website. I think Mariona has copied the address of the website, and we invite you, all of you, to particularly to visit our last output, which is an interactive site, which is called Researchers Like Me. This is a social site for early career researchers. So that's the last output of our projects. So we will be very grateful if you visit it and you send us feedback, telling us if it's useful or if you miss something. So it's a beta version now, but it's already working. So the community is just starting, but it's growing every day. So we will be more than grateful if you can just email us and send us your feedback about the site. We aim this site to be an interactive place for early career researchers to experience the sense of belonging and sharing. Okay, so this, I said, is the last session, but last but not least is important. It's an important session because it's a session that focuses on a topic that for us is now extremely relevant. Some of those that have been attending the previous sessions, you've been probably aware that we have been discussing several times of different paths, different careers paths, and people holding a PhD, not just working in the academia or at the university anymore, but exploring other possibilities. So we will focus on this issue in this session. That's a very emergent area of research. We still don't know so much, and one of the persons in the team, because she's part of our team, who knows more about that, it's Kelsey. So hello, Kelsey. Kelsey Inouye is the speaker for this session. She has been researching on this area, so how PhD holders are developing non-academic careers, what does that mean? So we will focus on that today. And just to introduce Kelsey, I said already that she's a member of our team. She completed her PhD at the University of Oxford, and she's currently working as a research associate at Lancaster University. And I would say, so we have been discussing this before, but I would say that she's also a good representative of these PhD holders looking for an alternative career, or at least looking for a career, because she's still trying to define where to develop her career. Some tips about who are here today. So because the format, the webinar format does not allow you, the participants, to know who are connected. So we are now almost 100 participants here. There are some more registered, almost 150, registered participants, so some people is still coming, so probably we will be more at the end of the session. What is even more amazing than the number of participants we are is that we come from different countries. So the participants here are spread all over the world. So we are people from Africa, Morocco, Nigeria, people from the United States, people from South America, Mexico, Colombia, Argentina, Ecuador, good morning there now, and Asia, India, Japan. We have some registered participants also from Egypt, and of course, members from all the European countries. So we are happy to have such a diverse group as has happened in other sessions. That's one of the advantages of this situation, online situation. There are many weaknesses, but this is one of the strengths of this format. More than half of the attendants today are pre-docs, and the rest are divided between doctoral program developers or program coordinators and postdocs. So as I said, it's a pleasure to have you here today, Kelsey. And as for the dynamics of the session, as the ones that attended the previous sessions know, that we will use the questions and answer tool for addressing questions to Kelsey about the content, and feel free to use the chat just to interact with the other participants or to comment on or whatever, any other purpose. So I think that's all for the moment. So the floor is yours, Kelsey. Good afternoon for us, maybe morning for others.
Great, thank you very much, Monsi, for the introduction. I will share my screen now. All right, okay. So as Monsi said, this project was part of the larger Erasmus grant project that had multiple strands of research around early career researchers. And particularly, I'm going to be talking about some work I was involved in with Professor Lynn McAlpine and also Dr. Isabel Scacchi. And in this project, we basically did interviews with PhD holders who are now working outside of academia in order to better understand their research and career trajectories. So I'm going to begin by giving sort of a very brief overview of some of the literature in this area. And it is a very sort of emerging area, so there's not that much available yet. But basically, PhD education has been framed as important in developing the knowledge economy, contributing skilled researchers to further innovation and technological development. Traditionally, the PhD was viewed as preparation for a career in academia. But however, as the number of PhD graduates has increased, the number of positions we see in academia has not necessarily kept up with that growth. And as a result, there is a supply and demand issue where a lot of PhD holders are now having to seek careers in other sectors. Part of the reason has to do with the high competition. PhD holders have also become disillusioned with the academic culture and have struggled with work-life balance issues, as well as related mental health issues in some cases. Some work from Belgium has also shown that PhDs in the humanities tend to feel less prepared for non-academic careers than those in natural sciences and engineering, which could be due to the fact that there tend to be more opportunities for industry collaboration in the natural sciences and engineering PhD programs. But overall, little is known about how academic skills are perceived and valued in non-academic sectors, which is what our work seeks to contribute to and sort of complicate. So as part of the Erasmus grant, we did 3 studies. The first and largest one was interviews with UK and Switzerland-based PhD holders now working in non-academic sectors. We focused on transitioning to non-academic sectors, job-seeking practices and strategies, as well as the relevance of the PhD to their current work. For this presentation, given the time constraints, I'm going to be focusing specifically on the UK context. However, if you would like information about the Swiss data, Dr. Isabel Skakny has reached out and told me that she's very willing to talk to people, and she was also the one in charge of collecting the Swiss data. The second study was a small case study of a private company based in the UK. Lynn interviewed employers and I interviewed employees, and the purpose of that was to get perspectives from each group on the purpose and experience of hiring and being hired at one company. And finally, the third study that is currently ongoing focuses more specifically on workplace communication in the UK. So we're focused on things like writing and oral communication in different sectors, the relevance of the PhD training to different writing practices. Okay, so in order to provide a bit of context for the next part of the presentation, I'm going to just talk very briefly about the PhD landscape in the UK. So first, only about 19% of PhDs in the UK end up in academia. Within academia, about 33% of academic staff were on fixed term contracts as of 2017 to 18 academic year. And these statistics are quite similar to what we'll find in other countries as well. For instance, in Canada and the US, about 25% of PhDs end up in tenure track positions. However, sort of the benefit that we found is that the employment rate for PhD holders is higher than for those who have only undergraduate degrees. So I'm going to briefly talk about the key findings that arose from our research before going into more specific cases of career trajectories. So first, most of the UK participants we interviewed decided to leave academia due to precarity or work-life balance issues, which is consistent with prior literature. Many participants decided to leave academia during the PhD, though there were a few who decided to leave after or during a postdoc. And often the decision was driven by observing the lives of their colleagues and noting how difficult it was to find a stable position. In terms of job seeking, all the participants relied heavily on online searching, looking at websites like jobs.ac.uk for different posts. However, they also noted the importance of networking in reaching out to people they knew in order to find out about positions. And a couple of participants talked about the value of cold calling. So basically calling up potential employers to inquire about either available positions or to ask whether positions were available. One participant specifically talked about applying even for jobs that he knew he didn't want as a way of getting more practice of submitting and attending interviews. And finally, career decision-making was often influenced by a variety of factors, including whether or not they had previously worked in a non-academic sector, the extent to which participants were mobile, which was often constrained by things like family considerations, relocating with your spouse, and that sort of thing. A few participants also mentioned the factors that arose from the current economy, or perhaps the government or certain political policies in place that might affect things like funding for different projects and just the general availability of jobs. Next, as the second part of the key findings section, I will talk briefly about PhD perspectives on the value of the PhD. So generally, the participants agreed that the benefits of the PhD included research skills, things like being able to do statistics, for instance, having experiences with interviews, and the ability to synthesize large amounts of information very quickly, such as in a literature review. However, in transitioning to non-academic careers, challenges included time management. Some participants were not used to having very strict deadlines for things, and also juggling many projects at one time. approaches to writing and communication were often quite different. For instance, in business sectors or policy sectors, participants found that, you know, they had to write much more concisely, use simpler language. The audience was not interested in the methodology of their research. They just wanted, what are the findings? What are the key sort of implications? Some participants also found collaboration, working in teams, very difficult because they had been used to working on solo projects throughout their PhD. And also another issue was around sort of recognition of the value of the PhD. Some participants felt that their employers didn't really understand what a PhD meant, and that it didn't necessarily add anything to their work, or, you know, just people didn't understand basically what it was supposed to mean. And then finally, looking briefly at employer perspectives, and this is employers at a specific, you know, UK company, so it's very limited, but basically the employer perspectives on the PhD was very similar to what the PhD holders themselves talked about. So employers who hired PhDs talked about the strengths of PhD holders as being critical thinking skills, research skills, depending on the particular project that the employees were working on. Knowledge of the higher education sector was also valuable, but challenges included adherence to strict deadlines and general understanding of how business works, as well as a tendency towards perfectionism, which links to the strict deadlines issue, in the sense that sometimes PhD holders would tend to really focus on getting something right and wanting it to be perfect, rather than realizing that, you know, they just have to kind of get things done on time for specific tasks in the business. Okay. So for this last part of the presentation, I'm going to present two examples of participants as a way to sort of see their particular career trajectories. So this first participant, who we've called Jenny, is female, in 31 to 35 age bracket. She received her PhD in the humanities in 2015 and is currently working in the public sector as a research professional. So Jenny did her PhD in the UK, though she is not a UK citizen. She initially pursued doctoral study because she enjoyed research and recently got married. And both she and her partner decided that they wanted to do a PhD together in the same place at the same university. During the PhD, Jenny spent a couple of years abroad doing her research, and while she was doing her fieldwork, she began working part-time for a consultancy firm. And she heard about this consultancy firm through a professor at her university. She continued to work part-time as a senior research associate for this consultancy firm after she completed the PhD in 2015. She was in that position for 3 years, during which time she had 2 children and moved to North America as her husband got a job in a North American city. So in 2018, she decided to start working full-time. And she found this job basically through web searches. Her job is as a research professional in a large government organization. And unlike most of our other participants, Jenny's current work is very much aligned with the subject matter of her PhD. So she finds her doctoral training very relevant. In this way, she feels very lucky that she's able to continue to do the things that she's very interested in. What she really enjoys about it as well is the fact that it's quite stable. She has good work-life balance. However, what she did not learn during the PhD and needs for her current job are things like project management and finance and that sort of thing. The one negative aspect of her job that she was concerned about had to do with kind of politics and the current government administration, because the administration had affected the way research in her department was talked about and understood. So going forward, Jenny is hoping to perhaps move again with her husband abroad internationally with their children. She's quite happy with her decision to leave academia. At the time she had, or during her PhD, she'd considered academia, but believed her CV was not quite academic enough, and her experience and sort of her interests lay more in the policy sector. So that's one example of a participant trajectory. So I would like to just give one more example. This participant's name is Grant. He is male, in his 40s, and he did his PhD in 2007. He is currently working in the private sector as a professional at a medium-sized business. So Grant was initially interested in an academic job. He got married during the PhD to another PhD student, and that is when he realized that it is very unlikely to find two academic posts in the same location. So as a result, when his wife got a postdoc contract in North America, they both moved to North America, where Grant worked in different research professional positions in government, and then briefly as an academic professional at a local university. All of his jobs were found by browsing online job boards, reaching out to his network or potential organizations about possible positions. 2 years after moving to North America, Grant's wife got a UK postdoc contract, so they relocated back to the UK. He spent 8 months as a research professional with the government before applying for and getting a professional post at a private company in 2012. After being at this company for 2 years, he submitted a business plan to establish and lead a North American expansion of the business. And he felt this was appropriate because the organization was open to global outreach and his wife's contract was going to expire. So his proposal was approved, and in 2014, they relocated again back to North America, where his wife was able to find academic work, and Grant continues to work as managing partner of this branch of the company. Primarily, his work involves administration, collaboration, and sort of generally building the business. He enjoys the work, although the field is, or the PhD field, is not necessarily linked to his current job. He does, however, find certain skills from the PhD useful. For instance, interviewing and the ability to work with people from a variety of sectors. A key skill that he lacked and did need to learn on the job was financial management, which is, again, very consistent with what we found in other participants. If Grant were to leave his job, he's talked about, the potential of returning to the university, either in an academic position, so he still hasn't completely gotten rid of the possibility of academia, or he'd be interested in working in higher education, but in perhaps like a higher level administrative, academic, professional type position. So the two cases I just showed you are examples of how participants have navigated their non-academic careers. And as you can see, there can be quite a lot of moving around. There's a lot of mobility involved in that sense, as well as going across different types of sectors. And for both participants, family was a very big factor in making decisions about where to move and what kinds of jobs to take. So I only have a few minutes left, so I'd like to leave you with a few brief takeaways from this quick presentation. So basically what our studies have found is that the PhD is valued for its critical thinking and as well as the research skills that PhDs develop during their programs. However, the extent to which these skills translate into non-academic sectors sort of remains to be seen, and whether or not the PhD is really recognized or valued by employers outside of academia is something that also needs further inquiry, as that's been a problem that came up amongst several participants who perhaps felt underemployed in their current work or underpaid, perhaps. Thus, future work might include looking at the perspectives and hiring practices of employers in multiple sectors, maybe making comparisons of the career trajectories of PhD holders from different disciplines, and perhaps comparative studies of different national contexts and different kinds of doctoral training programs. Because as we know, context often plays a huge role in the decisions that we make and also the nature of the hiring and what jobs are available. So thank you very much, and I'm open for questions.
Thank you very much, Kelsey. Yeah, there are several questions and some of them resonate some of the discussions in the morning, because we, I remember we saw in the morning that, yeah, PhD holders have better jobs, better salaries, but we still don't know, we need to unpack what does that mean. So what kind of jobs, what they are really doing at those jobs. So there is, yeah, a first question, which is precisely this one. So do the participants do research in their jobs? And if yes, how do they define this research? So, yeah.
Yes. So there was quite a lot of variation in the amount of participants who actually did research in their jobs. In general, I'd say participants who perhaps were in like policy or sometimes government organizations, for instance, they might do some research in terms of, most commonly would be things like literature reviews. Sometimes you might conduct interviews with people in order to assemble reports and things like that. But at the same time, quite a lot of participants really didn't do any sort of research activities in the way that we think about it in academia.
Yeah, and there's another question saying, what skills do you think should postdoc lack from their doctoral training? What can be done to prepare docs?
I mean, I think the first step is just making very clear that, you know, finding a job in academia is very difficult and that you need to be very strategic from the beginning of your PhD almost in order to build a specific career profile. I think some of the participants I talked to who seemed to be the most successful in their career trajectories, they often went outside of their PhD programs in order to develop skills. So things like trying to network with other groups of people, creating their own sort of like networking or research groups or interest groups. And it seems like that kind of communication skills was very important, because often non-academic employers might believe that, you know, PhDs are not the best at like orally communicating in simple language and that kind of thing. And that's something that has come up. So that's kind of one aspect.
Yeah, there's two questions that I think can be grouped. One is, how did you find your post-PhD interviewees? Because, yeah, it's true, they aren't often tracked. So were they alumni of the University of Oxford? And there is another question regarding if you have any examples of non-academic tracks for PhD in STEM.
Okay, so the first question, how did we find our interviewees? So that built off of another study that Lynn had, who's my supervisor and kind of overseeing the project. She had been involved in a previous study with PhDs and postdocs. And so we initially went to that contact list and followed up with these participants and said, would you be willing to participate in an additional study focusing on non-academic careers? So that's how we got our initial base of participants. And from there, we did a lot of snowball sampling. We posted the call for participants on Twitter and that kind of thing. So a lot of it was sort of more word of mouth, I think.
Yeah, because it's really complicated to find, those, PhD holders that are not working, they are not tracked, they are not working in the academia, so we don't know where they ended up. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And your second question was about non-academic careers for STEM?
Yeah.
Okay. So there was quite a variety. There were people who were working in things like, well, in research, but in more like, an industry setting, things like medical devices. There was someone who was working for a big funding agency that funds a lot of natural sciences and STEM research. And so they kind of drew on their knowledge of the field in making decisions about what to fund. Yeah, and I guess there were some people who went into more data analytics as well as another option. But also equally, there were people who did PhDs in natural sciences and STEM who just went into business or consulting and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. There's also a question on writing and non-academic writing. So if you could elaborate on the types of writing non-academic PhD have to do?
Yes, so again, there's a lot of variation just by sector and type of position. For instance, I interviewed a few people in consultant positions. They often had to write reports for particular clients. And these could be, the reports of, in one case, of certain interventions or more sort of research reports almost. But again, in writing this kind of report, it was very much like, this is the purpose of the research. This is very briefly what we did, and this is why it's important. So it's very kind of pared down from what you would see in like an academic article. On the other side, I saw lots of write-ups of conference reports or meeting notes, sending around bulletins or short memos within your department, updating them on different projects. And quite a few participants talked about the importance of emails, actually, because sort of the vocabulary and the presentation of yourself in an email can be very, very important, especially if you're reaching out to people who are quite powerful or prestigious or sort of above you in the hierarchy.
Probably issues of perfectionism that you mentioned before maybe are not appropriate in this type of writing. Yeah, there is another question which is related to age. So what job options in the non-academic sector would a 45-year-old person have after a complete academic profile?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I don't know. I don't feel like any of these jobs were particularly limited by age. I know I interviewed at least 2 people who had, fairly extensive academic careers. They'd done postdocs and maybe like lectureships and that sort of thing before leaving academia. I believe one was working in sort of a parapublic type organization focused around more like education or academic development. So it was kind of able to draw on her prior experience, but not be in an academic research role. And another person went the consulting route, basically. So I don't think age is necessarily a limitation on what kinds of careers you would go into.
Anna, who participated in one of the sessions, leading one of the sessions this morning, is asking about, if in both examples, PhD from humanities ended working in private business. So where did they acquire the competencies necessary for instance, designing a business plan like a CAN plan? So
from what I understand from talking to participants generally who worked in private business, a lot of it was sort of on the job work or on the job learning. So in terms of things like adjusting to the work culture or how to write certain documents and that sort of thing, a lot of it was sort of informal training. Participants said they would kind of just mimic what their colleagues would do, read their writing, because a lot of times in these contexts, there's a very clear and specific format of how things are displayed, and the language is very specific. And it was just a matter of kind of seeing what other people did, as more than having any kind of formal training, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. There is also a question from Nuria about success. So you mentioned several times success. How do you define what was, in your examples, a successful career path? Was life-career balance included there? Yeah.
Well, so the way I would define a successful career path is about whether the person is happy, whether they're satisfied with their career and how everything has played out in their lives. And actually, the participants who I interviewed, they all, except for maybe one, they were all quite happy in their career choices and in their decisions to leave academia. And a lot of that did seem to be the work-life balance issue, as well as just having that sense of security, because just the precariousness of academic work was a big factor why a lot of people left. And even though, you know, it seemed like it was a lot of work to find these jobs, you know, many applications were sent out, lots of networking was involved. From what I could tell from talking to the participants, it seemed like, you know, they were quite happy with the decisions that they made overall.
Mm-hmm. Did you, that's something I'm just thinking now. Did you find some of them that, well, they were happy, but working outside the academia was the option because inside was so difficult to find a job?
Yes. So there were at least two I can think of, who basically couldn't find a position after their like lectureship ended or after their postdoc ended, and they sort of had to look outside academia just in order to, you know, earn a living. One of those participants was, you know, she kind of still missed the passion that was involved in academia. So perhaps there's something around that idea of not being able to find a job and then having to search versus making the decision yourself to search.
Yeah, that's something we discussed also with Matthew yesterday. There are a couple of questions regarding PhDs from education. So there is this question saying, how does it work for something in education department? Do people with a PhD in education have any chances to find a job out of academia? And there is another question asking similar things. So how it works for PhD from education discipline?
And that's a good question. And again, I don't think that any of these results are discipline specific or sector specific. Like you can move, from what I understand, from pretty much any discipline into a range of non-academic careers. And a lot of it just seems to be about how you market yourself in a way. But it's also important to reflect on what skills you have, what you enjoy doing, and what kinds of work you would like to do. So some participants talked about going through these periods where they really sat down and they were like, what do I enjoy about the work that I've done? What do I not enjoy? And that helped them to identify the kinds of careers they'd go into. And then they'd make another list about, you know, what skills do I have? What can I offer to the, you know, to other career paths, whether it's your interviewing skills, your writing skills, your statistics skills, your analytical skills. And I thought that was really good advice because it helps you to make more educated and targeted decisions. And as a PhD holder in education myself, currently looking for jobs everywhere, it's also been quite useful to me because I don't think the education aspect of my PhD is necessarily a limitation. It's just more about what strengths can I bring to different kinds of jobs, if that sort of makes sense.
Yeah, because actually you said, and as far as I know in your data, So not all actually, and I think you said only one of the interviewees were doing a job which is related with their discipline. So they work in different fields. So from those that their PhD is, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Then it doesn't matter if you came from education. If you end up in a company that doing, I don't know, market studies, for example.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there is another question saying, asking for a tip. What kind of approaching should I do to private companies? How it should be?
Oh, well, I suppose, again, from what my participants have said, they talked about things like seeing, so if you search the job boards and things and you see openings that might be interesting to you, the participants might just call up, you know, whatever the contact info is for that job listing, in order to get a little bit more information about the job, so you have a better feel for what they might be looking for. And also some people felt that it was just kind of a nice thing to sort of call before you send in your application, to kind of have, you know, your name is out there, they sort of might recognize you and that kind of thing. Yeah, I don't know if there's any one way that is best to do it. I think it's just, you know, making the initiative to try to make contact. And even if there are no like openings, you could approach a company that you're interested in to find out more.
Yeah, being attentive. Yeah. There's another question saying, did you see many who transitioned into public policy, governmental positions, practitioners, and how was that transitions?
Yeah, there were some who did go into public policy and government. I don't remember exactly how many. In terms of the transition, I don't, you know, no one talked about it being a very difficult transition necessarily. I don't know. If I'm trying to think back, I do think that a lot of the people who went into the public policy route had some experience in policy, possibly before they started the PhD or during the PhD, or they had a specific interest in policy throughout their doctoral program, from what I remember. But yeah, I'd have to look back at my data for more specific.
Well, we finished with the questions. I was just thinking, doing this research for yourself, as you said, being an early career researcher looking for a position or looking for defining your career. Would you like to look for a non-academic career? And why, if yes?
I'm definitely open to it, and I have been since the beginning of my PhD. In part just because of the nature of my research, I've been very aware of the state of the academic career paths and how difficult it is. And in doing this research, it's been really helpful for me because it's made me much more aware of the different possibilities for careers that are out there. So although I have to say that my first choice would be in academia, I'd be interested in working for possibly things like research consultancies. I found have been quite interesting because they often, at least in the UK, the ones I've searched myself, they often are involved in a lot of research, possibly with things like the UKRI or even making partnerships with universities. So that's a way of being connected to research, but not in academia. And I've also looked a lot into sort of the higher education, academic, professional field. So administration, what else, like academic developers and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. It's a very valuable work and it's still connected to higher ed.
Yeah, I think one of the lessons, one of the ideas we can take away from this seminar is this idea of maybe more flexible careers. So we've been used at the university of thinking of a unique track. So you enter into yeah, a pre-tenure, then is a tenure, and you probably ended up at the university until the end of your career. So probably flexibility is what we need more and more, especially among early career researchers, this idea of being inside and outside the university during your career. You can merge different positions, or you can just not just defining a unique track or a unique path for careers. So I think it's one of the takeaways of this session, and probably the whole seminar. So thank you very much, Kelsey. It's already time. Thanks to all the participants, and especially to those that have been following several sessions. So I almost recognize you for the names, and hopefully we will continue with this kind of sessions. So they proved very interesting. I was at the beginning a little bit reluctant of not being able to do this event and this seminar face-to-face in a more traditional format, but just I realized that there are great possibilities that we need to explore with this online and virtual format. So let's continue exploring these possibilities. So thank you very much for all of you. We will keep in touch. We will send the questions, the remaining questions for the other sessions, and we hope we will interact through the website and through the interactive side, the social side, the researchers like me. So I'm happy to see you all there. Thank you. People is saying thank you. See you soon. We will repeat this kind of sessions. Don't worry. We will get back with more. Thanks, Kelsey.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.